I want a chance to introduce myself, and I'll introduce Mike and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves in the chat box. So my name's Ruth Schwendinger, and I get to do prevention with Prevention Network these days. And for me, the program I'm working on right now is working on building capacity at the community coalition level. And I've got a little bit of a sore throat tonight, so I'm going to do less talking than I intended, which is probably good for everybody. So I'm just going to pass it over to Mike and ask him to introduce himself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Tobias. I'm primarily the coordinator for the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking at Prevention Network. I've been here in that capacity since 2010. And before that, I was a volunteer for the organization for 10 plus years. So quite a bit of work history with the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking. Person in long-term recovery, it's probably why I got into this work. I'm a husband and father and grandpa, so like to fish. That's pretty much me.
Thank you, Mike. I want to invite everybody, as you are already doing, introduce yourself in the chat. If you could also include your email address, if you're present for the entire presentation and engage in the conversation, you can expect to receive a MCBAP certificate CEUs for an hour and a half for your time spent here tonight. So thank you. And I know a couple people already let me know they have to leave early. Please know that you can reach out to Mike or myself with questions. Our contact information is in the slide deck as well. So tonight we're focused on advocacy, and there are a lot of different things that we want to consider as we're going about this topic. And there's a couple of disclaimers right up front that we're going to make, and just let everybody know that we're not asking anybody to advocate for any particular legislation or changes. That's not our role. Tonight, we're focused on what does the process look like? What is our role in prevention, and specifically with coalitions? So what is the role of a coalition or a coalition leader when it comes to advocating for healthier opportunities, healthier lifestyle opportunities for people in Michigan, specifically with SUD prevention or substance misuse prevention? So Mike is gonna talk, and we've got our PowerPoint. Do you want to share that, or would you like me to?
I can pull it up. I've got it right here. So.
All right, so and I can launch the polls whenever you'd like. Just give me a heads up on that. When we're doing advocacy, it's built into your presentation here, but if you're going to be doing any specific advocacy, you always want to make sure it's okay with your funder, and you always want to make sure that if you're doing it with your profession, in your professional role, that you have the authority and the okay from your supervisors in doing that. So if you're representing anyone other than yourself as an individual, you want to make sure that that's cleared, because there are a lot of specific caveats when it comes to what can and cannot be done with funding. So Mike, you've got a couple questions up there. I'm going to mute myself, and if you need something, let me know.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. I know some of you fairly well, and some of you I don't know, but just a few questions to get to know you guys a little bit better, but you can see them there. But if anybody just wants to respond to any of these questions, as far as what do you like about your job? What type of work do you all do? Why are you here today? I know we're giving out CEUs, so that might be it. But why do you work in the field? But I'd like to hear from any of you, if you don't mind, just to start. Don't be shy.
Mike, hi. Do you want us to type it in or talk to you about this?
You can do either. Ruth can help with the chat, or somebody can, but you can go ahead, Barbara, if you want. Barbara, if you have something to say.
Sure. Yeah, we've worked with Mike for many years now. And my coalition, Chippewa Valley Coalition for Youth and Families, with Dr. McGunn as well. I like my job because I really, truly like to be in the community and see, the changes made. Getting our good prevention messages out there and our call to actions. And that's what I like about, working with the coalition. And we do all sorts of work. I've been on this chat is where we're a recipient of the Prevention Network grant. And so we're definitely getting more education from these great seminars that Ruth has been putting on and different people coming in. So we do all sorts of things. I'm here today just to check in on the advocacy part. I can't stay the whole time. I do apologize. I have a 5:30 meeting. And why do we work in the field? Again, we see results. We see that we help people, and makes me feel good personally.
So you help people, make people feel, okay, good.
Mhm.
I see some things in the chat, but anybody else want to add to that?
Well, this is Kelly from Sand Lake CMH. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh. So I work at Sand Lake CMH, but I get to chair the local prevention network, which is a subcommittee of our community collaborative here. And the reason I'm here today is just to learn more about the prevention field in general. And I've really been enjoying all of the training that the Prevention Network has been providing about the SPIF and the CSAP, and all of the strategies for prevention work. So my focus is more on mental health and suicide prevention, but we know that they overlap with substance use disorders. So that's I just really enjoy being out in the community, especially when I get to work with our young people, teaching them new things, more awareness about themselves, and just providing a service to the community in that way. So, and teaching mental health first aid, that's probably my favorite thing. I just love that.
Well, great. Amy says, I like getting the message out. Help is available for when you're ready. Sarah says, I enjoy working with a variety of community members. Lisa, I like working with organizations to promote STD prevention strategies and offering technical assistance on something I am passionate about. Our coalition is a combination of substance abuse prevention and suicide prevention. But any other thoughts about, why you like your job, the work that you do, what brings you to the field?
Mike, I think it's great when we can figure out what works and then share it with other people, because I think everybody's working toward the same goals of healthier communities and communities free of substance misuse and the consequences of that. But what we're looking at is within the strategic prevention framework, we know what works, we know what hasn't worked in the past, and the different roles that we all play, because it's important that it's a broad base. It's important that it's community focused, because if people in their own communities take ownership of the messages and they have the knowledge and the tools to implement effective change in, substance misuse prevention across the board, we're going to see a huge shift in just the culture, in the social norms, and in the overall well-being of the people across Michigan. So I appreciate using the strategic prevention framework as a base for what's working in our communities, and learning from people like yourself who have the knowledge and experience for the rest of us to learn from. So.
Right. Well, thanks everybody. Like I said, some of what's been mentioned, I like working in the field because I want to make a difference. I think in general, people get into the field because they want to make a difference. They want to help people. Mentioned, out in the community, I like being out and about, whatever the community is. It's hard just to sit at your desk, for me, sit at a desk or sit at my house now and do the work, although I've been more largely doing that the last couple of years. But I've always appreciated kind of being out and about and trying to organize a community, mobilize a community on different issues. So just want to get a little bit more to know all of you. And let me see here. What is the problem here? There we go. I guess I got to, hopefully I won't jump ahead, but all right. Guess I got to use my mouse to move it. Not used to using the mouse to move it. But anyhow, here are some learning objectives we're hoping to cover today. some definitions you can take a look at. And Ruth, you grabbed this from SAMHSA. This is coming from SAMHSA, talking about population change and environmental strategy. So that's what we're here to talk about. Do you want to comment at all on this, Ruth, at all? I wasn't going to comment much unless you want me to, but
Yeah, so we talked about this. It came up when we were having our podcast discussion. And I think there's just some terms for people who are not regularly in the SUD field, or people who are kind of new to prevention when we're talking about population change and environmental strategies. It really helps to define those so that when we use those terms, we all mean the same thing. So just for moving forward, and this is some of our learning objectives. So the difference between population change is that it's targeting a population group's knowledge, attitude, skills, and behavior. It's not individual change focused, which would be the contrast. And then the environmental strategy is kind of divided into two different things, and which is why we're talking about it tonight, because we're talking about advocacy in general, and it tends to be an environmental strategy. And this is from one of our CSAP strategies that's identified within the C3 programs. So the environmental strategy really establishes or changes those community standards, written or unwritten, and it really influences the prevalence and incidence of substance misuse in the general population. So it can be some of those regulatory things. It can be like a policy change or legal change, or it can relate to service, like an integration of recovery coaches in our treatment centers and really enhancing those partnerships. And so environmental strategies differ from several of the other strategies because they're so broad in scope. Typically, they affect the entire population. So that's why I wanted to kind of define those things.
thanks, Ruth. And I'm not really good at these definitions and things are really good at, I probably can't explain it better than what Ruth has. I feel like I know what it is, but have more trouble explaining it. So thanks, Ruth. So again, this is talking specifically about lobbying, and this looks like it came from the Michigan legislature's website, perhaps. And again, talks about communicating directly with an official in the executive branch, like the governor of state government, or an official in the legislative branch of state government, representatives or senators, for the purpose of influencing legislative or administrative action. Does not include the providing of technical information by a person other than a person as defined in subsection 5. So you can kind of read it there. So this is the Michigan legislature's website, or definition of lobbying. And I'm going to share a definition I like from the National Council on Nonprofits. And this was shared with our organization, I think from somebody that does our accounting, but it talks about kind of 3 components, communicating with decision makers, elected officials and staff, about existing or potential legislation, and urging a vote for or against. So he talks about the 3 components, decision makers, actual legislation, and asking for a vote. And then the other thing they say is all lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy. All advocacy is not lobbying. So a couple of different definitions. One is more specific to Michigan, I think, than the other. The first one, so I'd probably pay a little more attention to Michigan. And that's the other kind of confusion about this whole issue. There's different rules. So our organization, Prevention Network, is a 501c3. And there's different rules for a 501c3. It could be federal rules, which is a 501c3 designation, or there also could be additional state rules. Then there's rules from different grants. So there's a lot of different kind of rules or regulations, which I think makes it a little bit of a gray area, a little bit hard to, it's not as cut and dry, I don't think, as some things. And if anybody has any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them. But again, there is a lot of gray area talking about this but I always say this disclaimer. If you're, going to be engaging in this sort of work with policymakers, you want to have a clear understanding. Whoever you report to, your supervisor, you want to keep them informed, make sure there's no misunderstandings about the work that you're doing, and so you don't get yourself in any trouble. And also the funders oftentimes will have a lot to say about what you do with their funds. So if you've got federal money or grant money from different places, there could be additional restrictions if you're going to be using that money. And then this is operate within your existing roles, kind of also the same thing. Again, I always worry about somebody, if I'm going to be, again, representing Prevention Network or the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking, I want to make sure my supervisor understands that I'm, one, doing that, and two, they have a good understanding of what I'm going to say. We're on the same page. Otherwise, I can get myself in trouble. Does that make sense? And then this is some kind of differentiate between education, advocacy, and lobbying. So again, you can see that education is giving knowledge, talking about consequences, studies say this, current practices. Advocacy is raising some awareness, increasing readiness for change. I think in general, advocacy is about, you want something, you learn how to advocate pretty early in age. Think about going through the grocery store or something like that with your kid, or my granddaughter. She wants everything under the sun, and she'll work on me to try and make the case on why I should get her this candy or this toy or something like that. But she's trying to influence me. She's trying to I'm a decision maker on whether or not to give her this toy or not. And she's going to do all she can to influence me to buy her this toy. Sometimes she wins, sometimes she doesn't. But that's kind of a difference of advocacy, is you do want something usually. Then some bullets under lobbying, again, talking with those decision makers, those officials, their staff, asking for a vote for or against something. These are pretty cut and dry kinds of things. I want you to vote for House Bill XYZ, talking to a lawmaker. So these are kind of the broad kind of differences between education, advocacy, and lobbying.
So Mike, real quick on the lobbying points, with federal funding, all of that is not allowed. So when we're using federal funding, or if we are an agency receiving federal funding, we're not allowed to urge a vote for or against on any existing or potential legislation, or for or against additional funding. And so that's something to note, because within the C3 programs, which a lot of you are here because of, that applies directly to you and the funds that you've received or will receive as a part of that award. So, and there are a lot more documentation, there's a lot more detail available for what's allowable and in what situations people can participate. So if you have any questions about that, or as that is a gray area sometimes, let us know. We can look at specific situations and help you navigate that, if that's where you are coming from tonight.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to help you. And again, if you got these special restrictions, you cannot lobby with their money. You may be able to lobby if you have different pots of money, but again, it's going to be largely dependent on whoever you answer to. So a lot of people, you go to these different workshops and they say, have a bake sale, have some unrestricted funds. I'm guessing I know some of you are connected to like community coalitions out there, and probably a lot of you have grants and you get money from the state and federal money. But does any of your coalitions out there have what I would call, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'd call it restricted funds? Money you've raised through a bake sale, through training, through donations. But does any of the groups on right now, do you have any of those kinds of funds in your organization?
Mike, when we had the federal grant, we couldn't purchase any food with it, for example. It's very cut and dry on the federal grant of what you can and cannot do regarding your expenses. So some were restricted for sure. I just want to make another point on this slide right here, just to be certain that, or just to be clear, you can communicate with decision makers, your elected officials and so forth, in an advocacy way, of course, and education, raising awareness and so forth. So I didn't want people to, you can, it's not lobbying when you are talking to your decision makers about increasing awareness, educating them. Does that make sense? I just make sure, but urging the vote, that, that to me is the differentiation.
Yeah, taking action. And that's a good example about food, with the federal grants and things. So yeah, there's a lot of rules and restrictions and things. But does your coalition have any unrestricted funds, Barbara?
We do. We raised money a couple, well, we're actually now, we actually take donations. And we also do our big suicide awareness walk. And so those are unrestricted funds for the coalition. So we give them back to, our coalition team councils, and we fund some things for the kids and so forth.
Right.
We might need a mailing, et cetera. So if it's something that's not covered by the grant, then that's when you need your other funds.
Right. Anybody else have any unrestricted funds for their organization? Yeah, in general, that's probably a real drawback to our field. We're kind of dependent on these grants or this money. But again, if you're going to get into, if you want to get into, certainly if you want to get in lobbying, you got to have some additional funds. But it's healthier, I guess, as an organization too, if you have some non-restricted funds to do what you have more freedom, I guess you might say. Again, doesn't mean you can do anything. Doesn't mean that whoever you report to might still not want you doing this work for whatever reason. So again, the program I'm primarily the coordinator for is the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking. We have a lot of money, not a lot, but we have like $6,500. So we have a pot of money. Hang on one second. All right, thank you. My granddaughter and wife just came in, so I'm just letting them know. But anyhow, we've got a pot of money, $6,500, largely from like our annual conference and we just started setting a fee for a webinar, a small fee, but it's to help grow this little bit of money, because in theory, we have a lot more freedom what we can do with it. So again, if you might, not only is it just a good idea to have some additional funds with less restrictions on it, but I think particularly if you're going to get in this area, though, it would be helpful. And then again, if you're going to get in this area, again, crossing over to lobbying, you're going to need to track those things separately from your other money. Probably some of you work under different grants maybe, and you might have to track that separately already. So it'd be the same kind of thing. You'd have another pot of money and you track those activities separately. But we're going to have a bunch of examples coming up. But yeah, throw out that poll. That poll here, just take a few minutes and just get to know you guys a little bit better too. All right, we got everybody, I think 10 out of 10. So quite a mix. And can you share the results? Or is it up there? So 30% less than 2 years, 42 to 5, and then 30 over 10 years. All right, well, thanks. And again, kind of going back to the first question, can anybody ask, what kind of work do you guys do now? Do some of you, do you guys, based on the definition that was given earlier, do some of you already engage in environmental prevention? Is it more individual prevention? Are you guys doing presentations or education in schools, or what kind of work do all of you do? Or some of you do?
I can go ahead and answer that. So we do both. We do work in the schools. Like right now, we're working on a program for when kids are caught in schools with drugs or alcohol, or even outside of school, really, on a program that they can attend before they go back to school. Dangers of vaping, webinars, that type of thing. And then I'm at the Family Center of Grosse Pointe and Harbor Woods. And then we have a list of therapists on our website. We get calls every day from people looking for therapists for individual care. So we do both broad spectrum, schools, community work, and then we're a resource for people that need individual care too.
Thanks, Mary Jo. How about the rest? I always try to get a sense on what people are doing. I feel like a lot of my colleagues do a lot of classroom stuff, presentations and educational groups and things. But
yeah, I can share. This is Sarah May from Benzie County. I chair the coalition that is the Benzie Area Youth Initiative. And yeah, we work together really closely with our community mental health services to provide vaping education and other prevention efforts in the schools. And then also as a coalition, we're looking at more community-wide, how can we change some policies with different, like with discipline issues, or in the community too, with, with all the new marijuana dispensaries that have gone up, kind of like how to react to that. So it's a mixture, although we are a pretty small coalition, and I feel like we're just kind of getting started with the work.
well, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Yeah, and that's the kind. I really like working on the policy issues again, like rather than. But again, you need kind of what's the right word? Comprehensive prevention plan, I guess. So you have all different strategies. I like to work on a lot of the policy issues or system changes, those kinds of things. And so anybody else want to respond to things that they're working on?
You had several really good responses in the chat box. So
Thanks.
Sarah said combination of all you mentioned. Paige says school presentations and library and court programs. Barbara does student and parent education in the schools and community programs like Drug Take Back Day, Suicide Awareness Walk, etc. Research, MiFi. Amy says, in my role, I support local overdose prevention agencies as a contract manager for CDC funding that comes to the state of Michigan. And Lisa, I administer SUD prevention funds at the state level. I offer TA to the prevention field. So there's another resource for everybody. I manage any state general funds that are allocated to specific prevention organizations. So thank you for being here tonight, Lisa. I appreciate the support. One of the other things that Mike just touched on that I want to expand a little bit before we go back into specific details is that when we're doing prevention effectively, it needs to be part of a comprehensive approach. So we're looking at reaching people consistently and communicating the same level of positive prevention messaging across the board, so that when we're looking at health promotion and prevention at an individual level, and when we're looking at those targeted indicated prevention, when we're talking about programs in schools to reach students who maybe have been caught with a vape or with alcohol on the premise. And we're talking about across the board, we want to be comprehensive and also take a look at those policies, take a look at those things in our environment, which impact people's healthy choices or the lack thereof. And so we're looking at advocacy within a comprehensive strategic prevention framework, so that we're looking at who in our community is being impacted by the work that we're doing, and how can we encourage them to take a bigger role, more ownership of their own health choices, and changing the environment in which people are growing up to make sure that we have a more positive outlook on our future. So back to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. So, again, it's you need a comprehensive plan. But again, I really like, working on those policy issues, system changes. And so depending on what the work you are doing, I hope this workshop might give you a different lens to look at things, or maybe if you're not doing a lot on the environmental side, start to get some ideas of other things you could do in addition, like classroom presentations or education or some of those things. We're going to move in a little bit to talk about lobbying a little bit more. So there's direct lobbying and grassroots lobbying. And don't forget so there's kind of the definition of it. But again, it's basically, I'm talking to my lawmaker, Representative Frederick, and I say, hey, Representative Frederick, I want you to vote no on House Bill X, Y, Z. This is bad legislation. That's pretty direct, and it's called direct lobbying. Versus, I send out an email, I have a McCrud e-list, and I send out an e-list to all the people on the e-list saying, hey, contact Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey and tell him to not move this bill X, Y, Z forward, or something like that. So I'm contacting all of you coalition leaders, asking you to contact somebody who's a decision maker and telling them what they should do. But it's pretty straightforward, but you see the difference between direct lobbying and grassroots lobbying? Does that make sense? Oh. Okay, so some of you I know are familiar with CADCA probably. So some years ago, they put out this Strategizer 31 guidelines for advocacy, changing policies and laws to create a safer environments for youth. But Kelly, you got a question?
So is grassroots lobbying, does that fall under the definition of do not do with federal funds or restricted funds? Okay.
Yes, it does. Good question. Yes, it's still lobbying. So yes, it does fall under those. You got to be careful whenever you're lobbying, whether it's grassroots or direct, you got to be much more careful, and there's a process to how you do it. Good question.
You want to talk about that process a little bit as far as identifying, if you're in a situation where you find yourself presenting information to a committee or a council on something as an expert in your field versus I, as an individual, disassociated from my professional role, I'm going to go attend a city council meeting and advocate for, lobby for, turning down the local ordinance on pot shops. Like there's,
yeah, I'll comment a little bit further, Ruth, and I think we might even cover it also in some slides too. But so going back to kind of identifying who you are. So whenever you're talking to a lawmaker, I'll start out and say, hey, my name is Mike Tobias. I'm representing, I might say I'm representing the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking. Or if I'm not, if I'm going to lobby, I might just say, hi, my name is Mike Tobias. I'm a citizen who lives in Perry. I'm a constituent of yours. I'm not representing any organization. I'm just a citizen, constituent of yours. So I try to be very clear on who I'm representing. Or we created another organization just for this. So oftentimes when I lobby, I'll lobby on behalf of the Michigan Alcohol Policy Promoting Health and Safety. And so this group was created, became a vehicle so we could lobby, we being, I guess, me, but our group, because we could not lobby with working under Prevention Network or the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking. So we created another vehicle to do that, and I'll represent that. And I simply punch out or don't claim that time. It's not part of my work time when I do that sort of thing. So that's one thing. But again, you can go to, if you went to your city council meeting, I mean, you have every right to try and influence the people that represent you in the state, your local city, federally, just not as a representative of your coalition or your agency, unless you've got that authority and can do that. So I think, you should get involved with your local community or your state on issues. You just might have to represent yourself. I don't think I'm explaining this very clearly, but do you understand what I'm saying? I hope so. Again, if you have every right to go to your city council. Hi, I'm Mike Tobias. I'm a citizen of Perry. I don't want to see this ordinance changed. You know, I'm not saying I work for Prevention Network, or you can even say, and you've probably seen this on different, you know, town hall meetings on TV or something like that. Somebody might get up and say, I'm a teacher for a local school district. They don't identify the school district, and they don't say they're representing the school district, but they might say, I'm a teacher for a local school district, and I think, you know, changing these guidelines is a bad idea. You know, so they try to give the policymaker a little context, like, hey, I'm a teacher, I work in the field. This impacts me, but they're not representing their local school district, perhaps. So hopefully it's clear. Is it clear, or do we need to, you know, I feel like I might be missing the boat a little bit explaining this. Clear as mud? All right, there we go. Okay, so here are some examples taken from this strategizer. And so tell me, do you think, are these things lobbying, not lobbying? Any thoughts? We'll just take the first one, and I don't know if I can see everybody because I'm going back and forth these screens, but so maybe Ruth, if you can see everybody, can help me. But anybody want meeting with a legislator to talk about a social problem without mentioning a specific legislative proposal? Lobbying or not lobbying? What do you think? Anybody?
Not lobbying.
Lobbying.
You got split? We split the vote on that? Yes and no?
Let's ask for a thumbs up if your video is on, or in the emojis. You can do it that way. So a thumbs up if it's lobbying, thumbs down if it's not lobbying.
Yeah, thanks. And you can watch it. I'm just going to go through the things, but you watch the thumbs up and thumbs down, Ruth. Providing a legislator with educational materials about a specific piece of legislation without calling for specific action on the legislation. Responding to a written request from a legislative committee or subcommittee for information about a specific piece of legislation. A newsletter to your own membership providing information about a specific piece of legislation, your organization's position on the legislation, and the names of legislators who support and oppose the legislation, but not a specific call to action. Tracking activities of legislators, including votes, positions taken, contributions accepted, etc. I'm going to go on to the next one. Okay, so some more examples. Producing and disseminating research reports or studies that provide nonpartisan analysis on policy issues, including specific legislative issues. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Talking to the media about specific legislative proposals. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Meeting with the executive branch except to sign or veto a bill. Meeting with regulatory agencies at all levels, DEA, FDA, state health departments, etc. Advocating for better enforcement of existing laws, those that control alcohol sales to minors. Advocating the enactment and enforcement of private or voluntary policies, alcohol purchase restrictions in stadiums. Conducting public education campaigns to affect the opinions of the general public. For example, mass media educational campaign about the importance of not providing alcohol to minors. So I don't know how I can summarize that. Maybe put too many examples in there. Probably should have cut down the number of examples and gone through them. But can you summarize that at all? Were there things that people thought were lobbying or not lobbying?
I think Amy and Sarah really tried hard to keep up. You were going through those kind of quickly. The rest of us were kind of left in the dust after like halfway through the first page, I think.
Yeah, well, that's why I figured after I started going through this, there's quite a bit of examples and I can't see what's going on. So this is our first time. We'll improve it for next time. But anything stand out, put it this way, anything stand out, I can go back to the other slide too. Any of these on this page look like lobbying or non-lobbying?
I have a question. Meeting with the executive branch except to sign or veto a bill.
The executive,
Go ahead.
the executive branch would be like the governor, the
Yeah.
state of Michigan, or the president, or somebody from that branch of government. Was that your question, or what was your,
Well, I mean, I know what it is, but it says except to sign a veto or bill. So just having a meeting with the executive branch wouldn't be considered lobbying, would it? It would be depend upon the content of the meeting and what was said.
I'm in agreement with you, Kelly. That's what I would believe, yes. But
Okay.
again, other people might disagree, or they might disagree, or for whatever reason, they might not want you doing that kind of work. But yes, I'm on the same page with you on that.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about these examples? Lobbying, non-lobbying? I'll go up to the first slide too.
I was also wondering on the one about advocating for stricter enforcement of laws. So it's a call to action there. If you're advocating with, you know, not just local law enforcement, but with lawmakers, is that considered lobbying? Is that too?
No, that's a good question. I would say that, does anybody else have any thoughts on this first? I guess I'll kick it to anybody in the audience who might want to respond.
I was
would
just gonna say, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say that my understanding or what my belief, like once it becomes a law, you're not really I mean, yeah, if you're just asking for enforcement of that law, I mean, the law is already in place. So it's not really lobbying. You're just trying to see, hey, how can we better enforce this law? Unless you're asking for like, I don't know. I was just
I agree.
thinking, I'm sorry, now I'm thinking out loud, but unless like you're asking for a specific, like maybe if there's funding that you're not allowed to use or something and you're trying to get that, but then I don't know how that plays. I don't know. As it stands, advocating for better enforcement of existing laws. As I read that, I don't think that that's lobbying.
And I agree with Lisa. As it stands, I don't think it is. You could flip it and turn it into lobbying probably if, okay, you want better enforcement of existing laws. And then, you know, there's a law that's introduced that's going to do that. Then you're working on current legislation, you know. But as it stands, I don't believe that it is. But
When we're doing prevention work, there's a good, clear stopping point right there when it comes to advocating for environmental level change, is when it becomes a proposed law, or if you're advocating for a certain proposal. That's a clear line that we don't cross as professionals without the approval of our funders and our supervisors, our agency, whatever that is. And
So going in and advocating for stricter enforcement, which means we have to have more funding. So, you know, let's sponsor, you know, let's take a look at this bill or what we can do to increase funding. That would cross the line. But educating that we need stricter enforcement, period, would be different.
that's
Yeah.
exactly.
And I like this one right here, a little bit of piece, but a newsletter to your own membership providing information about a specific piece of legislation, your organization's position on the legislation, and the names of legislators who support and oppose the legislation, but not a specific call to action. So the short answer is, and this is just from this CADCA strategizer. It's a bit old now. I don't know how long it's been out for, but all of these examples are not lobbying under federal tax law. So again, they specify federal tax law. Might get a little grayer if you're looking at, you know, we're looking at Michigan, different things. So again, it's really tricky. But and Michigan has a lot of lobbyable officials, they call them in Michigan. And you can Google it and find it, but there's a lot of lobbyable officials in Michigan. It might even extend down to department heads of departments and things, directors. But there's a big long list. But again, there's a lot you can do, certainly under this federal tax law. So again, there's some more examples. We'll go a little slower this time.
Well, Mike, real quick, you said you're not quite sure how far that goes. The guidelines that I've seen say, or any staff member of that office. So
Yeah, they go
we're not allowed to advocate or lobby for particular bills or support or policy change, or we're also not allowed to lobby for additional or change in funds. So those are the two parts of the guidance that I've seen when it comes to implementing the federal grants that prevention typically uses.
Right. I will say again, nonprofits can lobby. They have a right to lobby if they want to. You just got to follow the procedures and how to do it. And again, it's got to be up to whether you're, your supervisor and the board, and they want to go in that direction. But there is legally nonprofits can lobby. The issue is when you start using federal money or grant money to do those activities. And so again, you can do this work if your organization is in a position where they can do it. You just got to usually have some different funding streams, and it doesn't have to be a lot of funding. It can be, when I say a lot, it could be a few $1,000s, because there's a lot you can do that's not lobbying. It's around education, advocacy. But again, if you want to take positions on bills or testify support or against bills, that's clearly lobbying. And you can do it as an organization if that's what you guys want to do. If you have some other funding, you just got to follow a process. Or again, if it's something you feel strongly about, then you might just do it on your own time. I mean, most people have personal emails. You could fire off an email to your policymaker about any issue as a citizen or as a constituent. So again, I'll try and go a little slower here, but again, we'll take it one by one. I'm just curious by, do you mind, can you read these, Ruth, or somebody else read them so I can see the thumbs up, thumbs down, but just read them one by one. I want to see, do you think it's lobbying, thumbs up or down? If it is lobbying, then is it grassroots or is it direct? Does that make sense?
Might need that in the chat. So if it's lobbying, thumbs up. If it's not lobbying, thumbs down. And then if it is lobbying, you're asking if it's direct or grassroots.
Yes.
So we'll put that in the chat if it's lobbying, direct or grassroots. So sending an email to your state senator asking him or her to vote against Senate Bill XYZ.
Lobbying, thumbs up. Not lobbying, I guess, thumbs down. So yes, lobbying. So is it direct or indirect? A direct thumbs up.
And we're seeing direct in the chat box. So
Yes, pretty much direct.
that's kind of our exact example, right? So talking to your state representatives and sharing fact sheets about how lowering the BAC limit to 0.05 BAC would save lives. Note that at this time, when you're doing this, there's no pending legislation related to the 0.05 BAC. So is that lobbying or not lobbying? Seeing a couple thumbs down.
Yes, I'm just looking at the thing now too, but yes, I don't believe it's any lobbying myself. So I'm in agreement with the people that said thumbs down.
Okay. And then somebody said not lobbying and grassroots, not to call anybody out. Absolutely, grassroots efforts are relevant, and that's a lot of what our community building is about, is grassroots efforts. But within our definitions today, we're looking at grassroots or direct lobbying and clarifying that as an issue. So the next one, you receive an email that asks you to contact your state senator to tell them to vote against Senate Bill XYZ. Is that lobbying or not lobbying? So Mike, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I'd say it's lobbying. Do you think it's indirect or direct? Maybe these thumbs up is complicated, but you can just shout it out maybe too. Yes, it is I'm getting lost myself now.
So somebody else is doing
indirect.
some grassroots
Grassroots.
lobbying, and if you do it, then it would be direct lobbying, right? So that was a really complicated.
Yeah, it's a little trick
Yeah,
question, maybe.
it's almost 5 o'clock, Mike. I don't think we can handle that much complication here. So the next one is testifying for or against a local ordinance that would increase penalties for adults that host parties for minors. Is that lobbying or not lobbying? So this would be at like a town hall meeting or something like that.
Anybody want to respond to that? Amy's got thumbs down, Louise thumbs up. Testifying for or against a local ordinance that would.
I want to
increase
change
penalties.
mine because I think it is. I didn't realize there was an actual ordinance bill. So I actually
Right.
think that it is.
I think it is too. Okay, we're all in agreement there.
Okay, that was a split vote.
What's that?
That was a split vote. I think there was some confusion there as well, so.
But I think she changed her vote, so I think it is lobbying. And then do you think is it direct or grassroots lobbying?
I think it'd be direct.
Yeah, I think it'd be direct too. All right, so what do we got next?
Meeting with the owner manager of a local radio station, asking them to tell the DJs to stop making comments that glorify alcohol and drug use.
Lobbying or not? All right.
Thumbs down on that, consistent across the board. So the next one, letter to Governor Whitmer praising her for the appointments she's made to MLCC, MLCC being the Michigan Liquor Control Commission.
Thumbs down, Amy. Anybody else with her? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I
thumbs
don't
down?
think that would be lobbying would be my vote.
You said it would not be or would?
Would not.
I don't think it would be lobbying either. Probably have to see what's in the letter, but if it's just talking about something she's made that decision, she's appointed these people. You're glad that they're appointed, they're doing a great job, you know?
Okay. So any questions on these so far? Any discussion you guys want to have at this point? It's okay to unmute and ask questions too. If you're not comfortable being on camera doing that, you can wait until the end and we can stop recording and just ask those questions, or you can contact us afterwards. So contracting with a polling firm to poll likely voters on, do they support extending alcohol sales to 4 a.m.? Do they support lowering the BAC to 0.05? Do they support mandatory server training for off-premise clerks? And I think we need clarification here, Mike. Is this with an existing proposal in the legislature or no?
It can be. Yeah, these are all existing things right now. So contracting with a polling firm to do this.
Okay. So if there's already a
Likely voters. Couple thumbs down. Anybody want to go thumbs up? I don't think it's lobbying either. It's policy research. You're trying to get some information about what people think. Again, there's other people that might disagree, or again, the disclaimer is sometimes it doesn't matter. And I'll actually share a story to this point too. But the last
maybe
one.
wait until the end, because we're getting close to the end, and then we can have more of a discussion if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay. So the last one on this page is sending an email to state lawmakers thanking them for voting against or for something. Sorry, and sending an email to lawmakers telling them how disappointed you were with them on a specific vote. So if the vote's already happened, again, lobbying or not lobbying?
Got a thumbs down. Anybody else want to weigh in? Thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I don't think it's lobbying. Again, this has already taken place. You're not trying to influence their vote. They've already voted on it. You're just thanking them, or maybe raising, shining a light that they didn't vote that way. And I'd extend even a letter to the editor, I think would be not lobbying, talking about how somebody voted or didn't vote.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Louise made a good point on that. If the vote has passed all the way through. So whether the vote's already happened or not, if the bill has become a law, then that would be the point of not whether or not they've already voted, because they might come around in another cycle, right?
Well, say it again, I don't quite get it. If a vote has taken place, they
The vote
voted
has
on,
taken place, but it might come around for another vote. Like if it was sent back to committee after revisions and then needs to come back out for another vote. So I think what the point was, if the bill has become a law, then their voting is in the past, and they're not allowed, that's not going to change. You're not advocating for a change in somebody's stance. But if that is still in the process of becoming a law, if it's not there yet, then it could still be lobbying, because the chances are that they may face another similar vote in the future.
gotcha. Well, there you go. Again, it's some gray area as
Right.
people have their own interpretations. It's really hard to get a definitive answer on some of these things. Again, I'll maybe share a story at the end, but I know we got to kind of speed up probably a little bit, but big P and little p, any ideas what that's about? People might have heard this expression before. I'm guessing I'm going to pick on Amy because I'm thinking she's pretty sharp, but any idea, Amy? Maybe Louise too, maybe Lisa.
I'm thinking people did not listen to the podcast before coming to the workshop tonight, Mike.
There we go.
Yep. Don't pick on me. I just put in the chat. I have no idea.
Okay, well, big P and little p. I think I've heard other people use it, so it's not, I don't know where I heard it from, but it's not like an original thought for me. Just other people that I know have used this. They talk about big P kind of more dealing with formal policymakers. When I say formal, like lawmakers, city council, those kinds of folks, people elected. Little p is more dealing with maybe informal policymakers. So some of those examples we talked about. So you go to well, again, I don't have it ready, but every now and then I get pictures of things in the environment that bother people. I took one myself a few weeks ago. Admire, walk into the store, and there's a display of a bunch of wine, and it says it's somehow connected to Women's History Month. Buy this wine, Women's History Month. So I guess that's the way to honor Women's History Month. And it's right almost as soon as you walk in the store. So I could go, ask to see the manager or try to set up a meeting with the store owner or the manager and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this display, this Women's History Month display. I don't think it's appropriate, whatever the argument is. I don't like it. Would you consider moving all of your alcohol to one section of the store and keeping it there? So again, they're not it's not somebody elected. It's not a formal policy maker. It's the owner of the store. They probably have some discretion on how they do things in the store. But that's in a nutshell, kind of big P and little p. Does that make sense? Formal policymakers versus kind of more informal. There's a lot of people that you work with in your local community coalitions who have some power, the chief of police about the way they do things, the principal of the school, the way they do things. That's not lobbying if you go and talk with them about, again, somebody mentioned, I think Sarah mentioned talking to the school district about improving their policies. That's not a lobbying issue. That's just good work. So again, I know you guys all love these examples, but we can fly through them better. So just shout it out. So 15 years ago, myself and some middle school students go to Carl's grocery store in Perry, and there's those little shopping baskets. On the side of the shopping basket, it has Marlboro logo. We talked to the store owner about, can we remove those stickers and put on a pro health message? And the guy said yes. So would this be an example of little p or big P?
Little P.
Little P.
Yeah, it's a store manager, store owner. 2 weeks ago, I met with law enforcement officials from Ingham County to discuss getting alcohol compliance checks started. We're trying to improve that system. Big P, little P,
Little P.
Little P.
little P.
Little P.
March 23rd, giving public comments at the MLCC semi-annual hearings. They have these by statute. They have 2 of them a year. They invite people from the public and stakeholders to talk to them about complaints or issues like that. Any thoughts?
What does MLCC stand for?
I'm sorry, the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. These are people appointed from the governor.
Can you expand on that, please, just a little, what their role is?
There's 5 liquor control commissioners. They are all appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. 3 of them are administrative commissioners who kind of make policy, and they vote on giving out liquor licenses and that sort of thing. The other 2 commissioners are hearing commissioners. So when a store like has a sale to a minor, then they determine what the penalty should be.
Thank you.
So giving comments to the Liquor Control Commission. Big P?
Big P.
Yeah, they're appointed by the governor. I haven't really given it much thought, but they are formal. I mean, they're formal policymakers for sure. They're appointed by the governor. So I'd say probably big P. That hasn't traditionally translated to lobbying, doing giving those comments, but it also might depend on what kind of comments you give. A few weeks ago, the PN's intern, myself, dropped off a copy of the state strategic plan to reduce underage drinking to lawmakers.
Say that's just education, right?
Yeah, actually, my own examples are getting a little confusing. It's just giving out, disseminating information, but you're talking to formal policymakers by dropping stuff off. But I'm kind of, it's getting a little bit muddy, the big P, little P on that. Years ago, working with Lansing School District to improve their policies and procedures regarding student involvement with athletics and extracurricular activities.
Little P.
Yep. In the fall, work with the former mayor of Perry to fight a ballot initiative on whether to allow marijuana dispensaries.
Big P.
Big P.
Big P, and probably more on the lobbying side of things too. Years ago, worked with Lansing Lugnuts on improving their alcohol service practices and policies. Lansing Lugnuts is an area baseball team.
Little P.
Yes. And a shout out to my colleague Amy was involved with that too.
So
We did a lot
Mike,
of good work with Lansing Lugnuts for a time there.
it just seems like everybody's getting it, like the information's gelling. Initially, when you went through your examples, there was a lot of uncertainty, and now that you've gone through the process and explained this a little bit, people are right on with little P, big P, lobbying, not lobbying. I think we're getting it. So thank you.
Yeah. And to some extent, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just trying to give out ideas of things that you may have already done yourself. But or might want to do these sorts of things too. But again, in general, little P is probably safer because you're not dealing with, as far as if you're worried about the lobbying issue, little P, working with little P, you're not dealing with formal policymakers. So it's a little easier to do this sort of policy work and not have to worry about lobbying or not lobbying. Boy, we're chock full of little P or big P. Let's just skip around. Let's just not do them all necessarily because we've got a lot of examples. Well, actually, I'd like to hear this first one though. Talking to U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow about potential changes you'd like to see about Medicare. What do people think?
Big P.
It's big P. Is it lobbying or not lobbying?
I think it's not lobbying because there's no bill.
I think it's not lobbying too, because there's no bill. It's kind of an issue. Been hearing about this talking to your state representatives calling for Michigan to remove Russian vodka from the products that MLCC provides. Big P, little p, lobbying, not lobbying. I'd say it's big P, but the same thing, probably not lobbying, because there's no pending legislation on this issue. But other people might, think differently. We talked about the compliance checks. Talking to your state senator about why you don't think Michigan should extend the sale of alcohol to 4 a.m. And there is pending legislation on this issue.
Big P.
Lobbying, yeah.
Big P, lobbying, yes. Again, more local examples, talking to the owner of a local party store and asking them that alcohol be kept behind the counter or in a specific area, kind of best practices and on product placement or location. Little P, talking to your local school superintendent about why they should participate in MiFi. And that's little p too. So your role in big P policy, again, you're gonna wanna make sure that whoever you answer to, they're okay with you do this, but saying that means to talk with your formal policymakers at all levels, become a familiar face, raise awareness among voting public about their record. Is that what that second bullet point's about?
Think about the consequences or projected consequences of existing legislation or
Okay.
pending.
Invite the formal policymakers to your coalition or events. Anybody done that? Guys have town hall meetings. And award ceremonies, incorporate them into your activities is a good way to build kind of a relationship with your policymakers. Attend their coffee hours. Anybody do those things? Probably all lawmakers have coffee hours. I think it's a great way to educate not only the lawmaker, but your community, because oftentimes members of the community participate in those. So you can say, I'm so-and-so with the, coalition to reduce alcohol and drugs or whatever. And this is a new campaign we have out. Again, if there's other people in the audience that are going to hear about that campaign. All of them pretty much have newsletters. So you can sign up to their newsletters. You can send letters to the editor, whether it's big P or little p. There's a lot of things. The Michigan Legislature website we didn't really get into, but they have a lot of tools for you to track what your lawmaker is doing, what bills are introduced. There's a lot of really good tools on the legislature's website. We don't really have time to get into, but you should check it out if you're interested in this sort of work.
Mike, we can do that next time too.
Okay.
We can take a look at that website specifically and help people find where they can start tracking some of those things as far as, history of votes or even who their representatives are. Because I think some people are not at that point of awareness because we focus on our communities and our immediate, what our communities are needing immediately right now. And so I think that would be really helpful next time to take a look at that site, figure out how we track bills, how we can track things as they progress through. But we've got about 10 minutes left.
Sure, I'm happy to take a look at that. So again, get your radar up, look at the stores. I used to go in the stores a lot. party stores and see how products are being displayed, where they're displayed. Can these things be stolen easily? Work with them on best practices and where they should put their products. But that radar, some of you are worked in the field long enough, I know, to be familiar with FACE. They were out of Clare, Michigan, did a lot of great work in the alcohol field. And they had a little character whose name was Radar. And that's what they always talked about, getting your radar up in your community. What's upsetting in your community about alcohol and drugs, and what can you do about it? It's kind of the nutshell. So again, I use that example of the DJ. Now I haven't actually done this, but people have. But a lot of times I feel like the DJs glorify alcohol and drug use and make jokes and everything else. And maybe I'm getting, as I get older, I think maybe I'm getting more sensitive or something. But it's like, maybe the coalition should call them up and explain some things, or talk to them about why we don't use the word drug addict anymore, or alcoholic, or some of those things. Where it's not really that funny, but people still often, for whatever reason, make light of substance use disorders. And so again, but if they never get that feedback about why it might be potentially harmful, they might not ever change the way they do things. So, but I encourage you to, again, walk through your party stores, get your radar up, look at your community. You probably already know, but what are the things that are upsetting you? Like I said, I walked into Meijer, I wasn't real pleased to see that display. I didn't talk to the manager that day, but we're discussing that within McCrud. Do we want to take that on and send a letter to Meijer and say, we'd like to talk about this issue, or could you just keep your alcohol in one section? We might not hear anything back, or who knows. But speaking up, if you see things are wrong, speak up, reach out to us for support.
We can take a look at that next time too, Mike. I do want to reiterate some of the things that we've already talked about. As far as, can you go back a couple of slides, please? There. So stand up and speak out when something's wrong. You talked about DJs oftentimes glorifying alcohol use or misuse. I think that our community of prevention professionals has done a fantastic job of doing some education and changing the norms when it comes to suicide prevention. And I would love to see something similar happen with substance misuse prevention. We've got guidelines printed up for when people are reporting on a death by suicide. We've got guidelines and outreach packets we can give to members of the media on that. And I think that we're seeing a development of some of those tools when it comes to reducing the stigmatizing language around substance misuse. But I think a lot of us are still not comfortable having those conversations. And we would benefit prevention across Michigan if we practice having those conversations at our local level. And then, as Lisa mentioned in the chat box, continue those conversations at the big P level. And Mike touched on this, and we'll loop back and reiterate it next time. But our role as prevention professionals, as people who are leading coalitions or working with coalitions, maybe that's your role, to be that familiar face with your policymakers. And so, like Mike said, get your radar up, become aware of what's upsetting people. And that's a great way to build momentum for coalition building, for capacity building, is when people are motivated for change already, does it align with your mission, with the values of your coalition? And how can you support those efforts as a community-based group? And so, when you're there consistently and you are that familiar face, as Mike has become with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission and others in Lansing, they will then turn to you and look to you for that education, for that information, because you're an expert. You're someone that they trust as a source of information. And so that's really important moving forward. So that's it for me. I'm gonna pass it back to Mike to answer Amy's question, and then we'll wrap up here in just a couple minutes. We do have a survey that we're going to ask everybody to fill out, just as far as the learning objectives for tonight. Thank you.
What do you got, Amy?
I just want wanted to, you brought up the Lansing lug nuts, and I think sometimes just having the conversation, because when we approached the Lansing lug nuts and said, you know, have you thought about these things with alcohol? At that time, the general manager was in recovery, and he couldn't say people were coming to me and asking about this because they weren't. And so our local drug-free coalition went and had the conversation. Hey, before you open, we know you'll have beer. What's it going to be like? How are you going to do it? And so then we could have a conversation, and that allowed that general manager to say, there's a drug-free community coalition that has brought up these really good points. Here's a list of policies. So he had the passion, but he needed kind of someone to lean on. And then also it was part of my job to get those resources to him, right? And so he had the support he needed. So it's not, you know, it's not like everybody's against us. They just don't really think it through.
Right. I think that was, you know, I really liked working with the lug nuts and the work we did with them. I think it was some of the best work we've done, or I've done in my career. I really appreciate the general manager just telling us what he could do and couldn't do, but he was very open to the conversation. But it was a really good experience to work with them. We should probably do it again because we haven't done that in a long time. The general manager moved on and things kind of fell by the way. I moved on and, you know, other things, but it was good work. And I blame Amy. Amy was one of the people that got me into this work too a little bit. I think maybe the first time I testified in front of a legislative body, so to speak, might have been the East Lansing City Council on the clean indoor air laws. And it was largely, I know Amy was involved in that, but I got the flavor for it, I guess. But anyways, any ideas on how to get started? Any thoughts what to do with this information? Any questions? We got a few minutes. Love to hear from you.
I just had a quick question on the opioid settlement funds that are coming into the counties. So I assume that would be advocacy to reach out to the county administrators and just find